people are leaning in to the moment, leaning into the discomfort, leaning into the what can I do, what have I done, what have I benefited from, and what do I need to be doing differently, rather than pulling away from it, rather than shying away from it, I think is really a beautiful opportunity for us to lead and lead in a way that is transformative for other people to say, if Boston can have this conversation, if Boston can do this work, if Boston can have this memorial, if Boston can erect that monument, if Boston can talk about X, Y, and Z, then so can we. And I think that is truly a profound moment to be in. It makes me proud to be from here and ever more willing to stay here than I have been previously.
We have a star-studded panel this evening, and I am so fortunate to call all of these folks my friends, and I admire them. I probably owe them a dinner for all the favors, the advice that they've given to me. And, you know, we've been, each and every one of us in a small way, been thinking about democracy and belonging, especially on the eve of our country's semi-quincentennial, our 250th anniversary of democracy. In 1973, on the bicentennial, we were in a very similar situation. We were in a presidential crisis. We were in 12% inflation. What we saw in Afghanistan a few years ago, they were witnessing this evacuation in Vietnam. During the celebration of the Boston Tea Party, they were throwing fake barrels of oil in Boston Harbor to protest the high prices of gas during that time. And the social media of the time was regular old TV. And so they were being propagandized through TV. And the top 3 shows were, you guys ready for this? All in the Family, yes. Sanford and Son, and Rich Man, Poor Man. And so we've been here before, different circumstances, but here we are again. And so here to talk about this and to share their stories on democracy and civic engagement, I'm gonna have them introduce themselves and really start the conversation by introducing themselves and answering one question: what has been their first story introduction to storytelling? And I'm gonna start to my far right. Sorry, Kendra.
Thank you so much, Imari, for the lovely welcome. It's wonderful to be here with my fellow panelists and to have all of you here. So my name's Kendra Field. I'm a historian and a professor at Tufts University, where I direct the Center for Public History. I'm engaged in a number of public projects, 10 Million Names, where we're gathering the names of the 10 million people who were enslaved in what became the US between the 1500s and the 1860s. And something called the Du Bois Forum, which is a gathering of writers, artists, and scholars engaged in the Black intellectual and artistic traditions that Du Bois himself helped to cultivate. By way of answering the question and introducing you to me more personally, I grew up with very close to my grandmother, who told really phenomenal stories, and she was a wonderful storyteller. I ended up many years later writing my PhD dissertation and later my first book about my grandmother's grandparents and their lives enslaved in Mississippi and Arkansas, and then migrating to the Black towns of Oklahoma and the former Creek Nation. So it's largely a kind of African-American and Creek Indian with a bit of Irish and a few other dimensions to it. But it's also a story about American expansion and shifting racial categories. And I would say that I was able to write that book ultimately because my grandmother's stories kind of gave me a map to something that didn't exist in the historical literature at the time or in our public, largely public consciousness. And so asking the question, is that allowed? Is it allowed as a scholar? Is that allowed as a descendant? How do we bring our own family and people's stories into the work is what I'm about mostly.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brandon Terry. I am a political philosopher at Harvard and the director of the Institute on Policing, Incarceration, and Public Safety at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research. And my interest in storytelling is a bit circuitous. I grew up in a family that loved to debate politics and was anchored in many ways along some of the biggest divides in Black political life. I had some uncles who were serious Black nationalists, others that were more liberal, some folks that were feminist. And watching them debate around the table, I got really into parts of the Black radical tradition at an early age. And learned about Martin Luther King primarily from his critics and from the kind of Pollyannish fairy tale story that were often told in K through 12 education. And when I went to college, people put the actual books in my hand. And many people don't know that Dr. King wrote 5 books in his lifetime, serious works of public philosophy. And I was just blown away at their sophistication, their rigor, their erudition, their political vision, and also their spiritual insight about how to live a life while engaged in trying to transform the world. And I began to wrestle with a deep philosophical problem, which is how can we have told a story so mythic in such a powerful way that we don't know the very thing we think we do, the thing we think we know the best. And basically since that moment, my life's philosophical work has been trying to unravel that knot. And so 2.5 weeks ago, I came out with a book called Shattered Dreams, Infinite Hope, a tragic vision of the civil rights movement, which is a philosophical look at the project of storytelling in history and the ways that certain narratives of the civil rights movement get taken up to license whole visions of how to do politics, how to make political judgments, and how to orient oneself in the world. And I've come to see storytelling as fundamentally a question about training our judgment to see what matters and what doesn't, and how it affects us in the present. So even our historical stories are really about us in the present. And so my work has really been about trying to understand what's happening as we absorb those tales.
Good evening. I'm Jeneé Osterheldt, Deputy Managing Editor of Culture and Development at the Boston Globe and founder of A Beautiful Resistance, a multimedia platform celebrating Black joy, Black lives, and sharing space with other folks of color in the tradition of Du Bois and Douglass and Baldwin, owning our narratives and taking back our gaze. My earliest memory of storytelling is, it's interesting. I was a latchkey kid, and not in the traditional 80s way where it's like 3rd grade, 4th grade. I was a latchkey kid in kindergarten. So for me, storytelling was kind of emotional support, like the stories I told myself, the stories I made up. I was a very early reader. I started reading when I was 3, and by the time I was in kindergarten, I was reading this book called The Phantom Toll Booth. And I think Milo's character, I know people don't think of that book as radical, but I do. Milo's character is just so amazing, and he builds this world of his own, and it's very mathematical and very literary, and I think something about that opened up world building within me and showed me a very like basic, as a child, of course I wasn't like, this is radical, but as a child I was very much like, wow, I can build spaces for myself. I can be in charge of how I see myself and the stories that I want to make and build and where I find comfort and how I adventure. And then as I became older, I come from the blessed generation of Source Magazine and Vibe and Honey and XXL. So I am very much from the Church of Dreamhampton. So Dreamhampton was the blueprint for me. Dreamhampton and Ananda Lewis, and being able to understand what it meant to tell stories of the little girls in my neighborhood with the big bamboo earrings and aspiring to have a Coach bag and an MCM and, not understanding all the implications of that, but being able to very much hold space and assign value to our beauty. Because, as Ronald Draper, an artist in the Bronx, always says, genius lives in the hood. And I think it really lit a fire in me to make sure that I'm always showing up as my full self and taking up space and telling stories of us, not just through the lens of the talented 10th or the excellence or the highly intellectual, but even in our most simple yet complex, beautiful Blackness.
I realize this is the DMV little circle in the middle.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jha D Amazi, and I am a principal at Mass Design Group. I'm based here in our Boston studio, where I lead the Public Memory and Memorials Lab, which is a portfolio of work that is focused on spatializing memory and asking questions of how we can expand narratives in the public realm. And my introduction to storytelling is kind of threefold. One, I must uplift my sister, whose birthday is today. She's not here with us, but I mean, she's living, but she's not here at the ICA. Let me clarify that. So like nobody can hug her today, but I will receive the hug and pass them on. But my sister is much older than me and was kind of adopted into our family. And every bedtime, you know, she would read me however many books we'd have, and I always want another book and another book and another book, and we would run out of books. And so I would say, well, tell me a story. And my sister would tell me these really beautiful, long, deep stories, and I always fell asleep on them. But that's not what mattered. What mattered is that she had this like endless imagination that I wanted, I yearned for. I was like, I want to be able to do what you do with these stories. And as I got older, I eventually realized she was actually telling me stories about her life and herself. And she had made herself these characters of the stories she was telling. And so that sparked my interest in storytelling and conversation. I would say the other part of it is, as some of you might have just heard in the keynote, my aunts and my mother would tell me these stories of their lives living here in Boston as second and third generation Black women who had been raised in advocacy, had been raised in civil rights fights, had been raised in demanding that the Black and brown communities were receiving the services and the respect and the acknowledgement and the resources that they needed to thrive fully and wholly in this city. And I could not wait for the Thanksgivings and the Christmases and the et cetera, where I knew all the aunts would be in the kitchen debating about what part of the story they owned and what part of the story was true. And so I'm in the corner writing it down. I'm like, you said last year it was this, and last year you said, you know, because I was very excited for this information. And I think where I struggled is that when I would leave from those holiday events, when I would go out into the city, when I would, you know, go on these school field trips, because I was a Metco student here in the Massachusetts area, and we would go into downtown Boston, none of what I heard at the table was represented outside. None of what I was told about our contribution, our greatness, our excellence was represented in the fabric of this city, and I struggled with that. And so the third way that I would say, you know, I was introduced or came into storytelling is through my work, yes, as an architect, but also as a spoken word artist and someone who is dedicated to lifting the voices of those who have historically been denied and marginalized because of these experiences that I've had in the privacy and in the love of my home. And so I use, you know, this space making, if you will, of architecture and the space making of poetry to say, we are here, we are loud, we are present, we are loved, we are worthy, and you will not ignore us. And so those are some of the ways that I've been introduced to storytelling.
Well, I could just have you all do a keynote right now. Memory, excellence, belonging, you know, these were all themes that I think echoed in each of your remarks. And, you know, and I really want to ask you, Jeneé and Brandon, the same question. So maybe because I know that you both grew up in the same region, and Brandon, you as a person who studies movements, and Jeneé as a journalist who has lived in many different cities, and I think you like to say you're a implanted Bostonian who is a hometown Bostonian.
I'm almost really from it.
Yeah, almost. I say I'm from Boston too. In your recollection of movements and civic engagement from your time in Boston or your time in other cities that you've lived in, how has the civic movements of those cities helped the city think about belonging in both remembering the past and future casting what's possible? Have you seen a successful example of that?
You know, I have lived in a lot of cities from the Bay Area to the Midwest. I actually lived in Kansas City when they were building that gorgeous architectural ballet theater. And I lived in Kansas City when you could walk down the middle of their downtown. Literally, like you could walk in the middle of Grand, which is the main artery of downtown, and there'd be no traffic. I was an intern there, and I was just like, why would I ever live here? And I watched it over the course of 5 years go from that to this gorgeous downtown, largely because of the architects and the artists alike. They put so much money in their local arts community, in First Fridays, in the ballet, in the symphony, and watching a city rally around not just the arts and the fine arts, but what it means to be a local maker and local creative, and invest in that, both in physical space and architecture, but also in access, really revitalized an entire downtown. And this was on the precipice of the Royals and the Chiefs reclaiming their, place in the sports lexicon. So it's a civic movement of a different kind. I want to point to Kansas City because it's not so much how we tend to look at civic movements, like BLM, but it is one that's really important to note because it's what happens when a city across identities and sectors recognizes the power of creative capital.
Yeah.
And the effects that has on communities of all kind. And coming from where we're from, although his dad might be, we're not from the same place because Baltimore is Baltimore. Baltimore is not the DMV at all. Everything about we are alien cousins, but with deep reverence. The region of Old Bay.
Yeah.
I think where we're from, there's such a pride, but also this privilege of access to Blackness and Black representation, so much so that it's almost taken for granted.
Absolutely.
So when I moved to Boston, something that I had deep reverence for, although I'm always going to be a girl that's from Northern Virginia that reps the DMV, VA all day, but one of the reasons why, as Avenue always jokes that I'm almost really from the town, which is Boston, but the thing that made me fall in love with Boston is that because of what Jha was explaining about the purposeful erasure of Black people and people of the diaspora in this city, not by themselves, but of the city, of the narratives, of the stories folks like to tell who aren't from this area about who lives here. Yeah. So it's very intentional erasure. I feel like it has created a collective movement amongst Brown and Black peoples that you don't often see in other major cities. So while the Haitian community is very much the Haitian community, or the Dominican community is themselves, the Cape Verdean community is themselves, they also belong to each other in this incredibly human and powerful way. And we can point to a lot of movements. We can point to desegregation. And there's so many movements that have happened, particularly in this great storied city. But for me, it's watching the collective Black and Brown peoples of this city come together across sectors and say, I am you and you and me. And the power that has cultivated. And we see it play out politically. We see it play out economically across every sector, particularly over the last decade. It has become more and more powerful, and it can be rooted back in the intersectional fight that we see happening with each other, the fight for each other, the human ring in Worcester, as those neighbors formed around and said, you're not gonna take one of ours. That very much we might be rude and cold, but these are our people, and you're not gonna come take our freedoms. That shit's amazing, and it's very radical.
Yeah, just going off of what Jeneé is talking about, and coming out of Baltimore and then having the kind of training I had in philosophy and social theory, I've always been really skeptical of what people would call symbolic politics, right? I've always been one of those people that's like, well, show me the budget, show me where the money's going, yeah, you building that, you renamed the street, you built this monument, that's not changing anything. I've been one of those people for a lot of my life. And part of it is coming out of a place like Baltimore where the symbolic things came relatively early, right? And the material things didn't change. So you got the projects named after all your Black heroes, but the murder rate is astronomical. And the human misery, the suffering that you're dealing with and that we're wrestling with is so intense. And so when the Embrace Project first started, it wasn't called the Embrace yet, it was just a King Monument. I came in early on as an advisor, as a King Scholar, when Paul English and Liz Walker and were just starting out the conversations. And it's just been an utterly transformative experience in my life because what I saw is that around this symbolic project, a whole community was forged. Like it allowed for, I think, not the first time, but in a really, I think, distinctive way, people from different parts of the city that don't usually collaborate or connect to meet each other and have a shared project. And to see it come to fruition, to see its convening power. I always tell my students, like, look at the Boston Magazine's list of, influential Bostonians before the Embrace Monument on Boston Common was built and look afterwards. The thing is totally transformed. And why is it? It's not because people weren't doing incredible work before, but it's because you're finally connecting people. People are finding out about the talent, the genius, the wisdom, the competence in these different sectors that they're not usually engaged with. And so it really has transformed how I think a lot about symbolic investment, symbolic politics, cultural politics. Because I think what these things can do is create a sense of a shared project and something that lots and lots of people can look at in the city and say, I'm part of that. This reflects an investment. And at the bottom, our panel is in part about democracy. That's what democracy really is being able to see yourself in the decisions, the investments, the commitments that are made by the broader society. When you don't have that, you start to have people drift away from the democratic project and grow alienated and apathetic about it.
That's right. All right. Start thinking about your question. We're going to open that up in 1 minute. But this question is for Kendra and Jha D. I'm biased. I think Boston gets a lot of things right. So the question is, what is Boston getting right about movements and belonging? And in your opinion, because I know you do work all across the country, and so do you. Who's better than us? Who's doing it right? I know that's hard. Don't throw anything at me.
Boston way to ask something.
Yeah.
Don't throw anything at me. And you can start on any order you want. You could say who's doing it better, or you could say they're doing all right and Boston's doing it better. So either way. We could be number one and they could be number two, or they could be number two and we could be number one. I think I said the same thing twice, right?
I think you did.
Okay.
This is a setup.
Wait, stop recording, y'all.
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer the second question. And I'm not going to answer the second question because it's not time to tell. It's too soon to know, quite honestly. And I do have the great privilege of working with some really dynamic partners across this country. And so it is hard to say, but as a native Bostonian, I've been here my whole life. I told y'all my mom and my aunts are second and third generation Black and brown folks here in the Boston area. I would say what we're doing right now in this moment is being expansive in our conversations. I think this is the loudest I have ever seen Boston to be. We are having intersectional conversations. We are having honest conversations. We are having hard conversations. There are a number of folks coming from so many arenas of life. We have the academics, we have the funders, we have the community, we have the educators that are willing to meet each other at the table in ways that we haven't necessarily done before, and to do so to have the hard conversations, which is not to say that the conversations weren't happening before, which is not to say that we weren't coming together before, but I think that there is a sort of reckoning that's happening where the stars are aligning in a way that says, okay, not only am I willing to come to the table, but I got time today, right? Like I have the time, I have the energy, the resources are abundant. People are watching, people are seeing, people are supporting, and we are ripe for what it is that we're wanting to actualize in this city. And I think the fact that people are leaning in to the moment, leaning into the discomfort, leaning into the what can I do, what have I done, what have I benefited from, and what do I need to be doing differently, rather than pulling away from it, rather than shying away from it, I think is really a beautiful opportunity for us to lead and lead in a way that is transformative for other people to say, if Boston can have this conversation, if Boston can do this work, if Boston can have this memorial, if Boston can erect that monument, if Boston can talk about X, Y, and Z, then so can we. And I think that is truly a profound moment to be in. It makes me proud to be from here and ever more willing to stay here than I have been previously.
That's great.
I'll just add two quick historical points, and then I look forward to the questions. A couple things that perhaps Boston has going for it now, in spite of its history, is that historically, this really was the heart of the abolition movement. It was also the heart of kind of outspoken Black abolitionists, and there was a lot of conflict within and beyond that movement, but there is that tradition here that I think we can draw upon in a post, desegregation moment, post-civil rights moment, to think about how to have the conversation differently when faced with similar challenges. And the second thing I'll say is that it is a place, partly related to the history of higher ed here, but where we have had a lot of paradoxes to contend with. It was both the first colony to legalize slavery and both the first to as well as the first to abolish it, right? So it has within its history these kind of contradictions that I think you can't ignore, and that create space for us to talk in a more kind of nuanced, complex, and complete way about what history is and what memory is.
Yeah.
So no second place on record. All right.
I'll say second place, Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where you also have played a role.
Well done.
He's almost really from it by the way he's asking these questions.
All right, so we're going to open up for questions while we have time. I know this is like a speed panel. First question, so 1, 2?
3.
3? Okay. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, yes.
My name is Ann Moritz, and I want to put two other balls in play. There's such a sense of hope in what you're saying, and you've made my day with this panel only. We've got a reality of a community lacking overall in trusting itself and finding itself in these times. And what you're talking about is giving us a way to be community in ways that we desperately need overall. I'm wondering if you can talk about the larger sphere of lack of trust and lack of community that may actually be helping us. The other is the enthusiasm of the legacy media in this city. And Jeneé, that's probably an area that you are best to respond to not only contribute to what you're talking about, but define creative ways to help build it. Those seem like two additional realities, and I'm wondering if you can comment.
Okay. Does someone want to take the first one, and then Jeneé, you'll take the second one?
Yeah, I'll take the second one.
You want to start with that?
You could go, or whoever can jump in.
Okay, Kendra, you'll take the first one. Jeneé, you'll take the second
No,
one.
Brandon's taking the
Okay,
first one because
okay.
it's about trust.
Okay.
So make no mistake about it, we're facing extraordinary challenges around the problem of trust. Part of it is about the nationalization of politics, that People are understanding even their local political realities and their interpersonal dynamics through, again, this is about storytelling, through sweeping stories about the fate of the United States and the role our political parties are playing in that, and the role that they see particular groups playing as, appendages of those parties. So we've got a deep, deep, deep-seated distrust, and some of it, a great deal of it, frankly, is warranted because people are no longer certain. I said recently, in an interview, we have people who are openly now, in a way that I think just wasn't common even 20 years ago. People were openly disputing the principle that all people are created equal, just openly expressing their views that many of our fellows are biologically unequal, that they are culturally unequal, and saying it with confidence and pride, like that they have a sense of transgressive value around it. So it's hard to trust in a moment like that. And we're surrounded by a media environment where it contributes to that nihilism because people just seem to say things for profit. They don't seem to be committed to much, and you get a nihilistic atmosphere where nothing seems to mean anything. And so in a moment like that, how do you start to rebuild trust? Well, to me, I think when words are losing their value and people are genuinely afraid of their fellows, it's only exemplarity that brings back trust. People actually committing to action and risking something, right? That's why I think something like the Embrace had the effect. That's why I think things like the 10-Point Coalition, I'm just talking local things, had their effect because people were genuinely risking something and committing themselves to something that then comes to fruition, a shared project that requires sacrifice, that requires putting something on the line. That's how people begin to rebuild their sense that you, among all these other people, actually mean what you say because you've risked something for it. Briefly, I'll end here, is that we talk often about Martin Luther King or the Civil Rights Movement and charisma, and people seem to think that that means Martin Luther King gives a great sermon. And Black people who go to a lot of church know that King's probably not in the top 50 preachers in the Black tradition. His charisma, in the traditional sense of being proximate to the divine, comes from risking everything for values. You say that if nothing else, we know that this is a person committed to these values because he's willing to die for it. He's willing to give up everything for it. And unfortunately, we're back in a moment like that where people are asking, what are you going to risk for me to know you mean it? Yep. That's how you build trust again.
Thank you. I didn't want to go first because this topic unbinds something in me that's hard to put back in the lid. So I wanted a minute to sort of streamline my answer. The distrust is warranted. It's long been warranted. And we're dealing with an administration that leveraged that distrust and muddied it with a level of lying that we've just never seen before. Lying about what is true, lying about what should be indisputable, using the distrust as a weapon, using what are warranted questions around media to drive to just blow a hole through its purpose, through its existence, to threaten its right. No president or administration since America's beginnings, has ever understood the power of narrative in media the way this administration does, or the power of arts and propaganda the way that this administration does. And because they know that, these are the things they're attacking. They're attacking the schools, they're attacking the museums, they're attacking humanities, they're attacking media, they're defunding, they're threatening. And this is all because if you can strip away a people's knowledge, if you can strip away their story, if you can strip away their history, and reassign and indoctrinate them into a false set of beliefs, then they have no footing. They become whatever you want them to be. It's why when we go to war, you take the oppressors take their schools, they take their museums, they burn their books. This is what's happening to us in real time right now. And it is the media's urgent responsibility to answer the call to truth-telling and space-making. When I created A Beautiful Resistance, it was the first time around. And I was starting to sow these seeds of like, I had covered Black Lives Matter and the murders of unarmed Black folks for many years. And it wasn't that George Floyd was the first, it's that I had kept spreadsheets of these deaths because that's how long I had been writing about it. And when I was on the plane on my way to George Floyd's funeral, I was feeling so sick because I couldn't decide if what I was doing was helping or hurting. And I just kept going back and forth, like, obviously we have to cover these things and shine a light on these things. But what does it mean to a people when our stories are only told through the lens of brutality and injustice? What does it mean to a people when you don't get to tell the story of who grew the biggest carrot at the farmer's market? But white people get to have those kind of stories all the time, those mundane, everyday stories of joy and just like valuable existence. What does it mean to beautifully exist? So that is why I created A Beautiful Resistance, and that is why Embrace is important. That's why it's important that it went from King Boston to Embrace. What does it mean to collectively wrap our arms around each other? What does it mean for journalists to not sit in a room and argue about whether we're gonna call the president a liar or not? Like, he's a liar. Why was there ever a debate on whether we're gonna call it an untruth or a lie? It's a lie. And the media has to get bold about the dangers of neutrality. Neutrality does not make good journalism if the neutrality means you're ignoring undisputable facts. You should be able to call a president a liar without your journalistic ethics being questioned. So it is not only our responsibility to do the due diligence of truth-telling and amplifying voices, but it's also our job to make sure that the photos are correct and nuanced. It's our job to make sure that we're not just writing the stories, but we're creating access. We're doing video. We're doing community events. Journalistic community events are a tool that is going to be necessary for us to re-earn that trust and build those bridges, create that access, and remind people why these things matter. I'm gonna just put a pin in it here because now I'm going on a tangent. But
You pissed Boo off.
Yep, and we're gonna end with one final quick wrap-up note. This day has been a day for recharging our battery. The conference is about abundance, radical joy, belonging. There's so much going on in the world today that is making folks feel afraid. There's so much happening that feels like scarcity, and it's hard to want to extend our arms, welcome people, and be joyful. It's hard to have an abundance mindset. So as we, in this panel, in this session, in 1 minute to 90 seconds, we have some academics and some secret Baptist preachers and ministers in this group. In 1 minute to 90 seconds, what words of wisdom can you draw from, relate to, or give us that we can take with us to our happy hour?
You want me to go first?
Yes,
again?
ma'am.
Okay. I think I'll be short and sweet. I'm gonna just close with a Howard Thurman quote that I encountered. So that's it's a good Boston story. One of King's mentors here that I encountered when I was, at some sort of, one of, millions of seemingly critical decision points in my 20s. And and I think I was thinking I was going to be I was tackling X, Y, and Z structural problems. I was thinking about organizing, and I was thinking about things in kind of a mathematical, scientific kind of way. But I was really thinking about questions of justice, and encountered these few sentences where Thurman said, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go and do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." And it just, I feel like looking back, it was such a clear moment for me where I said, you know what, I'm going to go do this thing that because I had left thinking, oh, I'm good at history, I love history, but that's not what the world needs right now. What we need is, organizing and policy making and a whole host of other things. But that kind of gave me the permission to go back. Really, I was taking care of my dad. He was dying at the time. My grandmother outlived him by 10 years, and she and I started going back to Oklahoma, former Black towns of Oklahoma, some still existing, and interviewing her relatives. And this was the way we kind of mourned his passing, but also made sense of the world together. And it took a long time, but I found a way to use history and engage with the past that does relate to the present. And I feel like that's some of the advice that I give to young people today.
Right, since we're quoting, I've been really lingering a lot on passage from W.E.B. Du Bois's 1920 text, Dark Water, where he just comes right out and says, pessimism is cowardice. And I think that's the big existential challenge of our time, is trying to ward off pessimism. There are lots of reasons to be afraid, a lot of reasons to be skeptical. But when he says that pessimism is cowardice, part of what he's trying to convey is the idea that we can't let our failures, our shortcomings, our defeats be treated as if that's all there is. And one of the things I love about your work, Beautiful Resistance, is the idea that telling these stories about people who have thrown themselves into trying to make a better world, trying to transform, trying to care for people's lives and make real people's lives just a little bit better. Those stories are partly how you prove that ugliness and pessimism isn't all there is. They're the source of a kind of wisdom that we need to train our judgment in the moment so that we don't give in, that we don't give up. So for me, those resources are about trying to find the right types of stories. I've moved to tragedy as a way of acknowledging defeat, acknowledging suffering without losing hope, warding off our pessimism. But whatever that is for people, I think that's what we need in this moment, is a discipline that wards off pessimism and tries to find the seams of hope in the present.
Amen. You got something, John? Yes, I can.
Yeah, I've been struggling with a lot of things lately, but the thing that I keep coming back to is this reminder that I know, I believe, I feel that we collectively are, have been, and will be greater than any evil they could ever stir up. And if you believe that, if you know that to be true, if you find that in yourself, if you find that in your community, if you find that in your elders, if you find that in your children, all of this suddenly feels or becomes so much more digestible. But you have to believe that we collectively, and the collectively part is critical there, right? Because it's very easy to lose trust, lose faith, disconnect, self-preserve, me, mine, my community, I need more, my pain is greater, my pain is deeper. It's easy to do that, but if we can collectively decide that we are greater than any evil that they are going to persist and insist on, then we got this. We got this. And when I look at Ezra, some of you know who Ezra is, and some of you don't. You'll meet him tonight. But when I look at that boy, when I look in his eyes, when he smiles, When he says good morning, I'm reminded I am greater because he's here. We are greater collectively than any of this. So lean into that.
Beautiful words of wisdom. I mean, to Jha's point, Ezra is here, but you are here. You woke up today. And I say this often, but I'm going to say it again. A million little miracles had to happen for you to simply wake up. So us being here is a very powerful thing. Waking up means there's another day of possibilities. I'm not asking you to be fearless. I'm asking you to do it scared. I'm not asking you to be the next Thurman or the next Melnia Cass, but I'm asking you as you take space to make space. I'm not asking you to resist and fight and protest to the point of sickness and you can't enjoy anything and you're just weary and tired. I'm asking you to make room for love and joy and respite so that you are restored and you also remember what it is we're fighting for. We are here, we are possible, and as a collective, we will always have more power than the people who try to politic us. So that is my wise words of affirmation and joy. We do got this.
This is democracy. Thank you all. Get up to the panel.